One of them wanted to be the security guy. He claimed he was a security guy.
Welcome to a Politico version of Security Guy Ready with my co-host, and well, not my co-host, kind of my co-host and my co-engineer, Mr. Tony Sweet. How you doing, Tony?
Hey, Chuck, what's going on?
Well, at my other station that shall go unmentioned, I had a presidential candidate on there about a year ago, right, for this year's cycle.
Right.
And I thought it was very interesting. As you know, I'm not registered Democrat or Republican, never have. I'm just kind of vote the way the wind blows and what makes sense and all that kind of thing. So I don't really endorse people or take stances, but I listen to everybody. I think it's important to listen to all points of view because there's always a nugget of truth and hope in things people say, right? So a friend of mine on the web, Roy Barron, is running for president, and I thought, you know what, we're going to get Roy on here and see what he has to say and go from there. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to do another political presidential, what do you call it, interview, I guess?
There you go.
Yeah, and now, I did invite Trump on. And I invited Hillary and tried to shame them into coming on the show, but they wouldn't go for it.
Not even a text?
No, not even. Well, I tweeted and they didn't reply to my tweet.
Okay.
But someday maybe they will. Since I was just approved for what today, Mr. Tony?
You were approved for iHeartRadio. Yes, you were.
That's very big news. I'm very excited about that. So let's welcome our guest, Mr. Roy Barron. Welcome to the show, Barron.
Yes.
All right. So, Mr. Roy, let's tell everybody what your candidacy platform is. And I'm not really good at this political interview stuff, so you got to help me through it. But you're running for the President of the United States, and tell us what you're running on.
Well, thanks for Chuck for having me on today. I'm running as a centrist candidate, which is quite an interesting way to run. I have a very strong policies when it comes to the military and ideas on how to stamp out terrorism and bring back jobs through my national service program, as well as bringing quality to government. I have over 16 years of quality assurance in the IT area.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so these are all huge things that none of the other candidates, Hillary and Trump, they never talk about these things, or they have no clue as to what those are all about. So,
well, they're politicians, and they're not. So a politician's not a leader, right? So, to lead is a verb, and a politician's a noun, and that tells you all you need to know about it. So tell us about your IT background that lends itself to this quality assurance.
Well, I've been director of quality assurance groups, including up to 10 people in the group, where I'm rolling out new software product releases or services. I've sat down with Six Sigma looking at the processes of how businesses worked. I've worked at Fortune 500 companies. I've worked for Meals on Wheels. I worked with my mom at Midway Drug and Alcohol Rehab Center in Knoxville, Tennessee, that's still going on today with about 80 people, helping a lot of people get through drug and alcohol addictions. And I've worked with Centers for Disease Control for over 2 years. So I work closely with federal government and leading up the Quality Assurance Department there at the CDC in Atlanta, Georgia. I've worked federal, state, and local, so I have a very unique perspective. I actually have a security clearance required to work for the CDC federal government. I do point out that Obama, because of his connections with all the communist-type mentoring that he actually couldn't even get a security clearance to work as a dog catcher.
Oh, that's interesting.
So I like to point that out. And I'm actually a natural-born citizen, and I can prove it. I have a birth certificate.
Now, why did you decide to run for president? What got upped your Irish, as I would say, and got you motivated to do this?
It's a great question. I've been doing Voice of Global Freedom for quite some time. Had you, Chuck, Harold, on before an interview to talk about security, getting a lot of security, talk to luminaries in education.
Hey, Roy, hold on 1 second. We'll get a little connection problem there. Can we get him back, Tony? Is that? Try it again. Try it again, Roy. Can you hear us now?
Yes. What led me to run for president is all luminaries that started interviewing on Voice of Global Freedom. And
hey, Roy, is that your phone or the computer?
I'm on the.
Oh, I couldn't hear him. Did he say phone? Yeah, it's the CIA could be interrupting us. Maybe I don't know, but you can maybe hear me, but I can't hear you. It's like every other word or something is coming in.
Oh, we're on the computer now.
Oh, that's weird. Should we try disconnect the Facebook? Does that interfere with it, or is that a separate thing? No. Facebook's still going. That's weird. We'll just edit this, Roy. We'll just keep working through it till it, picks up. But you were clear as a bell at first, and now it's all choppy.
Well, so I've been running for president because I've seen a lot of the issues that we have in America. We're facing some very
hey, Roy,
times.
Let's do this. Should we try disconnecting and reconnecting, Tony? Would that help? Yeah, it's completely spotty and choppy on your side. So let's try and reestablish a connection over here, and we'll run it one more time. So we're going to call him back. Is that what we'll do? We'll call you right back, Roy.
Okay, great.
All right.
That's funny that as soon as she starts.
You never know. I'm telling you. Maybe Facebook is farting around with it. I don't know. He's actually got some very good ideas. Now that looks better. So give me a sound check.
All right, how am I coming through?
That's better, except you have a line to the Giant's head. It's like filling up the whole screen. So back up a little bit.
Okay. Giant head.
Tilt it. Okay, there we go. All right, that's good. Okay. All right, so we'll cut that out. And I think the last question was, what motivated you to run for president? So we'll go from there. So Roy, what motivated you, to run for president? What upped your Irish that got you going on this?
Well, I've been quite a radio show host for Voices of Global Freedom and MagnifiedView.com websites, and bring a lot of the information, writing articles and doing interviews for many, many years now, and traveling the country. I wrote the award-winning book called Looking Glass Shattered, which is my travels from 5 years. When I started writing the book, it had nothing to do with politics. It was more about how can I help myself. And I kept changing the same book over and over. So I eventually realized I've got to run for president. So this has been going on actually several years that I've put myself out as a candidate. I've been doing interviews on radio and TV for quite some time. And so my biggest thing is where our country's going in 2016. We're being faced with tremendous economic difficulties. I've interviewed with Todd Bubba Horowitz, one of my dear close friends who's on Fox Business News, Neil Cavuto. So we talk about, we're due to a big drop similar to 2007 in the coming days or years even. It might be sooner than later, unfortunately. And this $20 trillion debt. And I've interviewed luminaries from Major General Valley to Lieutenant General McInerney, my good friend Lieutenant General Flynn. I just talked to him recently. These are the types of people that I have in my Rolodex. And I call it a dream team, is when I become president, I'm going to be offering them jobs, at least making offers, including Dr. Peg Luksik, who ran for governor, who is the expert on how to reform and restore a Common Core and get rid of it, and luminaries such as doctors on how to redo Obamacare. So these are the types of people I'm going to bring into the administration. I call it a dream team. And so I feel I've been led to meet all these incredible people such as yourself, Chuck Harold, and see where we can work together and bring out a better America in 2016. And I'm running as a centrist candidate, which is a quite unique platform. And people can learn more on roybarron.com. So what really compelled me was 2016. I'm not a Trump or a Hillary fan, so to speak. I see us plummeting, and I see us, our borders are wide open. We're losing our sovereignty. And I do believe I'm worried that we will become a globalist part of this future. America is just going to become part of Mexico and Canada and just kind of fade away. And so those are the types of reasons why I'm running, is I want to restore sovereignty to America and make sure that we keep our borders.
Well, it's a good point. We are a nation of laws, and that's why it's worked. Form follows function. And we see our laws and rights kind of getting eroded a little bit every day. Give me your plan. So now when you ask these other candidates what their plan is, they don't really have a plan. They just talk a lot. And I think you're the type of guy that has a plan. So to the plan, speak first about what you think is the most serious threat to our country. And it could be, when I say threat, I mean it could be economic, it could be security, it could be a lot of things. How would you define our biggest problem we have in America? What's going to take us down, so to speak?
Well, I do. Our biggest problem is that we have become this divided nation, and why I'm running as a centrist is about 70% approximately of all Americans are centrists. They're not left or right. There's about 15% that are left, and there's 15% that are right. But the vast majority of people are centrists. They're in the middle, and they want to find someone who can represent them in Washington, D.C., and bring about changes. Our biggest threat right now is we have become this divided country. I want to emphasize the First Lady just made an announcement saying that the White House was made by slaves. And Obama talks frequently about shopping at a store as an African American and saying, all the security guards are watching me because I'm African American. So I feel like race relations have been set back 70 years at least. And so we're having to need a president in 2016 who's a unifier and then bringing people together like Abraham Lincoln had to do back in 1865 after the Civil War. Our biggest threat is that we're so divided, and most TV talk shows, they're either right or they're left, and they're just yelling and yelling and screaming. And I'm the person who can step into that chair, bring the dream team in, as I've interviewed like Sheriff Joe Arpaio and Dr. Peg Luksic, Chuck Harold, all these luminaries in all their different respective fields of security and foreign policy, healthcare, and bring us together and all backgrounds. We desperately need to become united again. Unfortunately, we have become the divided states of America, and that's the number one problem that we have facing America today.
You know, I'm going to agree with you, Mr. Tony. What do you think about that? That makes sense to me. I think, right?
No, I do agree.
And that's not a right or left position. That's
Right.
just really kind of common sense. So back in the 70s, Roy, I was raised in a mixed racial family. My stepmother was black, and I had 3 stepbrothers and sisters that were black, and there was 10 of us in one house. And I got to tell you, we had some issues. I was called a lot of names because I lived with an African-American family back in the day. But nothing like now. I have never experienced, and I've lived the life, okay? So I can say this. I never experienced anything like that back in the day in the 70s as is going on now. It's just so mean and divisive and nasty. And I think most of it's just a bunch of made-up baloney. Is there racism going on? Absolutely. There always will be, always has been since the beginning of time. But I think, to Roy's point, if 70% of the people are centrist, and that's probably true, let's say it's 60%, that's still true, right? Then I think this is a cause of the problem. You can't pick a side when everybody's divided, right? You can't pick the one side that we're all united on.
Right.
So I think that's a good point, Roy.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, and media really spreads this a lot because it's become more commentary. So Fox News they believe that they want to get viewers. That's true of any kind of creative project. So I do salute that. Whether you write a book, I have my book Looking Glass Shattered, or we're on your show right now. We don't want people to turn it off. We want to keep people going. Right now, the common nomenclature for doing media is that they want to see people yelling and divisiveness and fighting and all that.
Well,
they believe they
yeah.
get more viewership from that.
I mean, so I'm in the biz, right? And I'm new to the biz, and my show's an hour long, and some people might say it's a little long, but most people say it's not boring, right? So we try to make it not boring by having a lot of energy and being excited about the issues. And I was listening to a guy that's been in the business a long time, and he said the average cycle that they speak is 8 minutes on their radio show, right? And then they go to a commercial. And then they speak another 8 minutes about something else, and they go to a commercial. So to keep people's attention, you have to have high energy. And if you're telling the truth, that may be interesting or it may be boring. If it's boring, they're not going to cover it. And I think that's one reason they don't cover a lot of stories in the media. Maybe not so much for the conspiracy theory that they're trying to be left-wing or right-wing, whatever you want to say. But if they don't think it's going to get a rating, I think that's their first consideration. And that's not right. And you miss a lot of data that way. I like to listen to BBC, right? Because that's a whole different group of people that look at us differently. And you hear stories on BBC you don't hear in America. And from my friends overseas, they think we're a bunch of lunatics right now. We're in this election cycle. They can't figure it out. It's kind of weird. So, Roy, tell me about some ideas you have for security, because we're a security show, right? So give me some ideas you have for national security, local security, all that kind of stuff.
Well, I actually have a plan that nobody else is talking about that will actually permanently defeat terrorism forever and ever. And what my plan is, going back to 1945 during the towards the end of the World War II, all the great leaders, the Allied forces, met in a small small island called Malta. So we had FDR, we had at the time we had Winston Churchill, all these powerful leaders. Stalin was there, basically dividing up the world. And they knew that they were on the winning team, so to speak. But I think we've got to do that with the Middle East. We've got to bring back the colonial powers. As president in 2016, I would sit down with China, Russia, all the main players, and I would say, okay, we've got to go back to the Middle East. We can't allow fundamental Islam anymore. We're going to divide it up, and whatever part of the Middle East that you own, you'll control that oil. So it's going to take a lot of negotiations. But for example, France would be a natural person to go back and take over Libya and rule with a very hard military dictatorship. I don't like Saddam Hussein at all. He did horrible things, but we have seen that he did keep this fundamental Islam under control, under wraps. So these are real hard, firm things that it'll also get rid of the refugee crisis, because you'll allow people to come back from Europe to these Middle Eastern countries. So I'm talking about a permanent change. I do believe that part of our issues are these wars that we've been in, it seems like forever now, since 9/11, ongoing, that there is the military industrial complex has a lot of money to be made by continuing them instead of actually winning. But I'm offering a winning solution. This will actually make it work with all these leaders. And as I said, we've got to include China and Russia, which of course they're not considered our allies, but whoever partition it, you get this part of the oil. And I am a huge fan of Israel, and I would like to see the borders of Israel actually grow more than they are today. So I'm a huge proponent of working with President Netanyahu, and together, the two of us, will make their borders a lot larger than they are today. And I'm also a big fan of the fences and the walls. I agree with walls, but also destroying tunnels and on our southern border. And also Israel has proven since the Intifada, when they built the walls, that they're significantly safer in Israel because of the walls. So the same thing needs to be applied here in America, so we prevent more of these Kate Steinle type attacks, where the illegal in San Francisco, beautiful, wonderful lady at 32, she's killed just simply because she wanted to tour and have fun in San Francisco. I emphasize to the audience is that Kate Steinle could be any of us. Any of us could have been right where she was in San Francisco, enjoying the beautiful, wonderful city. And any of us could have been killed as Kate Steinle was. So we have to end sanctuary cities as well. Actually, laws on the book today don't allow sanctuary cities. It's just a lot of these cities that are run by the governments there, they're allowing sanctuary cities to happen, but they're actually violating the laws. A lot of people don't realize that. We already have books on the laws to rid the sanctuary cities.
Well, I agree with you on the law thing. I was doing some research years ago for somebody who wanted to know what they could do about somebody that was kind of lording around a school. And I said, oh, well, that section, penal code, blah, blah, blah. And I went to go look it up, and I couldn't find it. They had taken it away, right? And this is kind of like the basic lording around school provision, and then there's a pedophile provision where you can't be within 1,000 feet, right? But those have been modified. And I said, that doesn't make any sense to me. So the research I found was that I think it was under Schwarzenegger they got rid of some of those things. So we're not following our basic laws, and we're changing laws, and that causes a lot of problems. But I want to be devil's advocate for you on the Middle East issue, right? So one point of view would be that the reason it's all fakakta over there is because the British did divide it up in the first place. That's what caused it. So how do you answer those group of people who have a legitimate point of view? We have to discuss it, right? That, post-war, or pre-war, actually, I think it was pre-war. It was just all kind of a map, and the British said, okay, let's give this to, here's the Italian part, let's get this over here and put this over here, and they divided it up, and one argument is that caused the problem we have now. What do you think?
Well, I do know the argument when they built the lines of that, and the Sunni Shia have been fighting for thousands and thousands of years, so nothing new under the sun. They were even fighting when they had more of the military dictators in charge in Libya, Iraq, and so forth. So, they did draw the lines, and they didn't draw them according to these Sunnis were inside of this box, the Shias were inside of this box. But I think we have the opportunity to bring back colonial powers and really strong military dictators, and include the right drawing of the line, so to speak. So I would believe Iraq should be three separate areas. There should be a Kurdistan, there's a Sunni area, and then there's a Shia in the south. Baghdad is mostly Shia. So I believe in when we do bring back the colonial powers, we'll do it right. But there's still, I want to emphasize, a lot of these people are still living 7th century. We had a lot of hope, or some people did with the Arab Spring, that this would bring, true democracy, freedom. We realize they're just not there yet. They're still living 7th century. You know, I just saw an ad in Saudi Arabia where they're looking for people to cut people's heads off. I mean, that's actually a Craigslist job offer. You can actually get a job cutting heads. So
Wow.
that's the reality of where they're living. They have a lot of time to catch up to our 21st century ways. And that's also my immigration policy is if you can live, act, work, and think 21st century, we'll want you here in the United States of America. But if you're not 21st century type of thinking or ways, you have no business coming to the United States of America, because we are a 21st century country. I have that's a very simple immigration policy as well, or refugee policy. If you don't fit that 21st century way and culture, there's no way you're going to be here, and there's no way you're going to unite into our culture. But so to answer your question, is I realized that there were mistakes when they did draw those lines back in the 1920s when the colonials created all of that, and oil wasn't anywhere near what it is. I like to tell the audience that we'd all be sitting naked in the wilderness if it weren't for oil. I think a lot of people might not realize that oil isn't so much that we need today. It's become much greater than just what fills up our gas tank. I think that's a huge point of it. So we bring back the colonial powers, but we also divide them up along the right ways. And we look to maybe 200 years from now that we hope that the Muslims will catch up. I emphasize that in Israel today, out of about 8 million Israelis, there's 1 million Muslims that live in peace. And there are some Muslims that are really good people. So, and they're well vetted, and they integrate really well within society in Israel. And I believe that same process can be towards Muslims all around the world.
Well, that's the model in America. Every country on earth lives here, and form follows function, right? So America would not be what it is if it were not for how we did it, and good and bad included, right? So if we didn't have some of the bad things, or we didn't have some of the good things, we would not be in the shape we are today, which is, the greatest country on earth in a way. I believe that, really. Now, here's what I'm going to differ with you on. So I was a policeman. I've never been in the military. My family has. Many of my members of my family served in the military. I took the test to go in the Navy, and then I figured I'd get court-martialed immediately, all right? Because I'm just the type of guy, people can't tell me what to do. It doesn't work well, right? So I understood my limits, and I became a police officer so I served the country that way. But what I know about the military is it's very effective at doing things like making a parking lot out of something, all right? Just flattening it, and let's rebuild it. I don't think the military is good or should be used for police actions, right? That model has never worked. So I'm going to kind of engage these people. I'm going to kind of shoot them. I'm going to kind of control them. No, it's either, hi, this is the United States Army, and we need you to stop doing that, or we're going to flatten you. And they say, that's too bad, we're going to keep doing it. Then you flatten them, and then the problem's over, right? So how can you set up these military dictatorships? And I understand they're going to be run locally by their local military, but that just never seems to sustain or work for a long period of time. And I would not advocate bringing our troops in to start that, because we've done that model, and look what happened. Because eventually our political process pulls us out of wars. I think you would agree with that. We all start out going, that's a great war, but Americans don't like to stay in wars very long or in conflict. So how would you handle, if you're going to set that up that way, how would you handle that part of it, is making that military the policeman of the country?
Well, as the colonial powers used to be, we would have a governor, and again, it's a worldwide effort, and I'm looking at this is the way to prevent World War III from happening, which we are very likely to happen if we don't do some drastic changes. So I would still have a governor, so-called a governor appointed, maybe there's a better word for it, but from each of these countries. So France would have a governor that would monitor parts of Libya, or Great Britain would have their governor that would monitor that section of the Middle East. And the military would report up to that governor in charge. And of course, we'd want to choose really good people for those positions. So that's a major part of it as well. I'm really unhappy with Turkey right now. I actually would. I understand what NATO. I think if they got taken out of NATO, Russia would just completely annihilate Turkey the next day. So I kind of understand that, but I'm really unhappy with the current leadership. I want to see a change there. I also want to see Kurdistan rise up. I want to even go so far as to put Kurdistan as a part of NATO again. But I want to emphasize the bigger picture. Right now, Obama's talking about this coalition. He keeps saying we have a coalition of about 60 nations. The coalition's really a joke. It's about 80 to 90% of this coalition is the United States of America. You know, we're doing the vast majority of funding for NATO, the vast majority for the United Nations, the vast majority for this coalition attacking ISIS, which actually ISIS and Hezbollah are just as dangerous, and Hezbollah is probably even more dangerous than ISIS. And the cartels in Mexico are equally as dangerous to Americans. I want to emphasize, I want to hear the talking heads talk about ISIS, Hezbollah, the Iranian terrorists, and cartel in the same breath. And I'm not hearing that. Everybody's just ISIS, ISIS. But
well,
so
they keep changing the name all the time, and you can't tell who's who. But it's basically all a bunch of bad guys doing bad things. I mean, that's the way I look at it. I oversimplify it, but that's what it comes down to. Now, let's talk about domestic. So, let's say your plan doesn't completely work to eliminate terrorism, because I'm not sure it would. My plan would be more simple. Guess what? We're not buying any more oil from you guys, right? And you know what? Since we're their number one market, that's going to dry up a lot of funding, right? That's part of it. And we don't need it, by the way, because we have tons of oil here. We're just kind of saving it, and we're not using it like we should. But let's say that doesn't work completely. What do you think about national security on a local front? What can we do to make things a little better? Because I think we're very divisive. I see more internal groups as more of a threat. I believe that before ISIS comes and blows up a mall, we're going to have some crazy guy that says, hey, I got a C on my term paper, and I'm going to go shoot you, right? A la UCLA, right? So what would you do to handle that kind of stuff domestically?
Well, I take some hard actions. I want to also emphasize a big part of why there is a lower crime rate in Japan and some of the Asian countries is that when someone commits a crime or does some horrible terrorist act, it's they're culturally, they look at not just the individual, they look at the entire family as being involved. So they're kind of all found guilty. So I want to try to bring more of that type of looking through the looking glass, so to speak, here in the United States of America. So some of my ideas are, if it's an extremist religion, like we just learned recently last summer, I interviewed Robert Spencer, director of Jihad Watch. Great interview. You can check it out on Voices of Global Freedom. That mosque from Phoenix came in and with two guys intent on just blowing up the place, shooting people. Thank God for a 60-year-old street cop. He shot him two bullets in the head, and they were dead. And we all learned about the Garland, Texas attacks. Robert Spencer and Pamela Geller, who were leading that up, had to go in a safe room. So my policy would be if someone came from any, and I won't just say a mosque, I'll say any extremist religion. We did also learn about a horrible act where a guy went into an African-American church in South Carolina and shot 9 people. And the results were all the Confederate flags started coming down across the nation. So if someone from a group that's known to be, and we have the intelligence and the FBI knows, that would be completely demolished. So I would be bold enough to say a mosque like that wouldn't exist the next day. We'd come in with bulldozers, the Army Corps of Engineers, and just completely tear it down, because there's something really wrong, really, really wrong with that. And the same thing with that guy who shot up the church, whatever church he might have been. I'm not sure if he was affiliated with a church or whatever institution was driving him. We go back and look at that and completely destroy it, level it. So any of these types of extreme religions, one of my backpackadotes, which is like an antidote, is that the extreme religions ruin it for all the rest of us. And that's the root of a lot of our problems. Are religion, power, money, and resources are causing a lot of our national security issues. But I would meet within the first few days of my presidency. I would meet with FBI Director Comey, a great guy. He's doing a great job protecting Americans. And I would say, well, what do you need? What do you need? And whatever he tells me, I would tell him, look him in the eye, and I would say, we're going to double that. Because right now, every 4 days, there's a terrorist attack that's stopped. And because of our brave men working in the FBI and law enforcement are preventing tremendous attacks on our country. So I would just double whatever Director Comey would tell me, and we're going to have to come up with the money somehow, because we can't have another San Bernardino. We saw the Paris attacks, the Brussels attacks, the Garland, Texas attack. There's so many. I want to emphasize we've had 27,000 attacks by Islam fundamentalism since 9/11. That's all across the world, but that's a lot of attacks by the Islam fundamentalists, and that has to be knocked out. And brave people like Robert Spencer, Claire Lopez, Center for Security Policy, General Valley, Stand Up America, US.org, all these great people that I've interviewed and talked with, put their policies into protecting Americans, and we'll have a much safer America through that, and really preventing these types of attacks. We can go a long way.
Well, now here's part of the problem with the surveillance. Even if you doubled the amount of personnel, right? And I can't remember which show we did this, Tony, but maybe you remember. It was several months ago. One guy told us that if you're going to follow one guy around, you need 14 agents or something like that. It was
I don't remember, but
it was
I'm
a huge
sure
number.
It sounds right.
Yeah, I mean, so you would, they have 1,000 people that are on a list, and you need 14 for each person, right? So that becomes economically not feasible because they can't hire that many guys to follow them around. So that model, I'm not sure it would work. I mean, they do stop a lot of things right now, right, because of that. But the surveillance and throwing the manpower at it, I don't think they could do it. I don't think they could even hire enough FBI agents. They would pass the test for all that stuff.
Right.
It's quite a bit. But we do have to do something. Now, how do you distinguish our rights here? Because I'm all about rights, okay? So we have in this country the freedom of religion, not the freedom from religion. A lot of people think it's from, but it's freedom of, right? And there certainly is legitimate Islam all around the world, right? You don't hear about any nonsense going on. So how do we distinguish what's legitimate and what's not? I think that's a huge challenge, and I think that's a challenge that's actually hurting us in one way, because we're just assuming everything has to be legitimate when in fact it's not. Oh, now is that the Global Freedom dog voicing their opinion there?
Got a couple dogs.
All right. They heard my voice and they started barking. I'm not sure that's good.
Yeah, they're getting upset. This is a hot topic with them. So, yeah, we do the best we can. I think it's called human intelligence. We can't disregard that. We are living in this time with drones, just wiping out people. But we've always got to have human intelligence. We've got to have, that saying, boots on the ground, or people really watching carefully. But I do see that we do need a certain amount of profiling, and I'll give an example. One is if someone's in a wheelchair, they're in their 70s, and they're a Swedish nun, we don't need to really take a look at this person so much. But if someone's in their 20s, they're lean and they're fit, and we see on social media they're shouting Allah Akbar, and then they're going to do, their violent types of things, and yeah, we need to really take a hard look at that. So part of the human intelligence, and we have all the other great technology to really go after the bad guys. So we do the best we can, and but we also look at, who do we really need to look at, and that does lead into the Patriot Act. And my own opinions on that is that the Patriot Act doesn't apply to all people, but there are certain people like the Allah Akbar shouting type people. Yeah, those are the people we really need to take a hard look at.
Well, but that's not a profile. I mean, people throw that word around a lot, and people ask me, was there profiling when you were a policeman? And I say, no. And they say, I don't believe it because I've heard stories, blah, blah, blah. I will tell you this. If I did profiling as a police officer, I'd probably never arrest anybody, right? Because it's just it's a numbers game. Let's stop all the people that look like this, and I got to stop 100 of them to maybe find somebody, right? But if I concentrated on people's behavior, regardless of race or a profile, whatever you want to call it, then you catch people, because the behavior, if it's criminal, it makes me say that guy's a bad guy. It's not about profiling as a race. Is just it's a stupid concept, and I never saw it, by the way, in 13 years. Right? We just knew that that's a bad guy. So if we use the profiling method, we're going to miss people, right? Frankly, right? Because maybe the nun in the wheelchair is carrying a bomb. It's all possible. And there's been incidents where people that seem to be completely not associated or related, there's a mother of three back in 2001 or 2 or something that, stay-at-home mom decided to join the cause and blew up a bunch of people in Israel, right? And so that profiling didn't work because we would have not seen her and not paid attention to her because she's a mother of 3, right? So I think we have to go on, Roy, I think we got to go on behavior, right? So how would you define behavior as opposed to profiling? How might that work better?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I guess it's all in the definition of words. I mean, there's some other topics I'd love to talk about, when it comes to using a specific word, but I guess profiling, I would use it in the sense of behavior. The Boston Massacre, those guys looked just like you and I. They were Caucasian, the guys who planted the bombs
right.
at the marathon there. So that's an example.
But their behavior, if we looked at it, probably would have given us a clue if we acted on their behavior. So I think that's kind of a thing we have to look at. Now, how much time we got left, Tony? About 10 minutes? Okay. So, Roy, you had a really good program we were talking about before the show, kind of a national volunteer program. And tell us about that. I think that's very interesting.
Well, if you go to my website, roybarron.com, you'll find a national service program, which is very unique. It's it's going to be sent out to all the mom and pop type contract companies, and it will transform America. It's going to bring a lot of solutions to different things like our crumbling infrastructure. I do believe English should be our national language, creating more English teachers specifically. And we'll have an aptitude test. So what would happen, I like to give this example most is, let's say someone who's a gangster in Chicago is about to join a gang and they don't have a criminal record, but they've been before a judge for, say, a minor crime like marijuana possession. And the judge has 2 decisions to make. One is you're going to spend, I don't know, a few months in jail, or we're going to you sign up for a 3-year commitment. You're going to go to Florida. It has to be a completely different state for this to work. And you're going to work. We're going to do an aptitude test on you and see what do you really shine at. Are you a good engineer? Are you do you want to be a teacher, or do you want to help our crumbling infrastructure, our interstates? So we'll send you to Florida, and you're going to get that job. You're going to get paid money. It is voluntary, but it's a 3-year commitment, just like how it's similar to the military. When you sign up to the military, you get a 3-year commitment. You serve your time, you get added benefits such as GI Bill and other things. So if you serve your time, and this is 100% privatized, you will get opportunities, and you'll be able to actually excel in the area that you really like to do, whether it's electronics, maybe you're good at programming or that, but it can also offer people other things and throwing them into our huge prison system that we don't, it just becomes a waste bucket.
So it's a nationalized wood shop. Remember wood shop? Did you have wood shop back in the day? Yeah. There was wood shop, auto shop, printing, and 4 or 5 shops. And you know what? If you weren't a book genius, that's great. That's fine. Not everybody's a book genius. And there's not, I assign equal value to all things, right? So if you're a woodworker or an egghead, you still contribute, right?
What if you're not good at either?
Well, then I guess you're going to have to, I don't know. That's another question. There are some people like that, right? But I think everybody has some kind of vocation they can do. So I like that idea, Roy, that we're getting people, out of the jail system, training them for a vocation or a skill or something that would work. So differentiate this between yours and the Peace Corps and what's the other one, America, the Volunteer America, or the other organization that's a government.
Well, that's a big part of what I would get rid of is right now we have these socialized programs. A lot of people don't even realize we do have an AmeriCorps, which
AmeriCorps, right? Yeah,
it's called AmeriCorps. The intent is to actually help America. Bill Clinton signed that into law back in the 90s, and it's been a disaster. I know that personally because I've talked to a lot of AmeriCorps people. So I would get rid of AmeriCorps, I would get rid of Job Corps, and I would get rid of Peace Corps, actually, because I think we've gotten to the point. A big hashtag I have is called Nation Build USA. With our $20 trillion debt, we need to look at cutting a lot of foreign aid, not necessarily all of it, but we need to bring the aid back here to the United States. 63% of Americans can't afford a $500 bill of any kind. So the time to look at nation building in the United States of America only is right now. I want to this program is, again, privatized and it's voluntary. You don't have to do it, but it's going to be such a great program that people are going to want to sign up for it and join it. So like you said, some of the default people that maybe they don't fall into something, maybe they want to go work in the woods for a while. And, that is part of AmeriCorps currently, help dig some trenches and help our park systems with flooding, or maybe they want to put out fires in these forest fires, or help with the horrible we're seeing in Texas right now, all the flooding. So there's so much opportunity for this. I really hope that whether I become president, which I hope for, but I know it's a miracle of miracles that I would win, or someone else will work with me to make this really happen. I think it's a wonderful opportunity. A big part of this is also is most people spend their entire lives within 40 miles of their home state. So this is an opportunity where you take someone from, say, Chicago to Florida, and they see this vast, humongous country, and they get to be disconnected from maybe their drug buddies or their criminal friends, and they're with a whole bunch of new friends. The program would have to be run like with someone like a Lieutenant Colonel Alan B. West, who I know personally. I've interviewed with him before. It would have to be run kind of more of a military style type thing, but that it has to have some kind of discipline and respect, and it can teach a lot of good things and get people to see how vast America is. And I just see so much wonderful things with this program.
I like the concept. Would my son, who sits on the couch and doesn't do anything all day with his college degree, would he be able to join something like this? In other words, he's not a troubled youth. He just wants to experience something new. Would he be able to do something like that? Or is it really more for rehabilitation purposes?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, it would be an opportunity for that. And of course, it's going to need a lot of management. I'm a huge fan of the Boy Scout from the 1970s. And I guess I have to emphasize that because I'm not in total agreement with where the Boy Scouts is in 2016. So I made it up to life. The only thing I lacked was service projects when I was in the Boy Scouts. And I figure I'm an Eagle, though. I made it to life, which is one step below Eagle. But I've been doing service projects my whole life. But yeah, your son would definitely be a candidate for that. And it could be a possibility where we're going to need a lot of different layers of management. So, or, whatever that he might excel in. But a part of it is like using the Briggs-Myers exams, where we really do decide what is the aptitude, what is a good fit for this person. I want to create jobs with meaning that people love to do. I have to throw in this, Perry, who was governor of Texas, said, oh yeah, we got all these great jobs in Texas. We created them. But when we looked at them with a fine tooth comb, they were all service jobs, the type of job where you hit the snooze alarm 12 times and you hate going to work. So I want to create jobs with meaning that people love to do. I think it's got to be run with discipline, but also with compassion as well. I don't want to, necessarily have it. It won't be a boot camp. It would be more like a Boy Scout camp type of run organization. So huge potential, and I want to see this really take off.
Now, do you have a military background? Because you do use a lot of military models, which are good models, by the way. So I'm just curious if you have any background like that.
I think most Americans don't realize is that pretty much everything you see that's run by the military, and I live with Yoda for 19 months, who has been in all kinds of wars with no names. He was in Vietnam, Korea, you name it. So I got a tremendous amount of learning working with him on Voices of Global Freedom as co-host and producer. I personally have not been in the military, but I consider myself as a contractor to military because I've had so many luminaries like some of our friends in common, like Lieutenant Randy Sutton, Sean with SHR Media, Annie Ubelis with Southern Sense Radio, on and on. So many people that I've worked closely with that I've really understood a lot more of what it is. Michael Connolly with United States Justice Foundations. These are all veterans or military, law enforcement, intel. Claire Lopez, CIA, 22 years, retired. So I personally haven't done that, but I've worked. My dad was in the Army. We just did a funeral for him. I want to say thank you to the East Tennessee Honor Guard. He was drafted and served 2 years during Korea from 52 to 54. And working with Yoda has been unbelievable, was a really important part of my life because he's one of the rare people that actually has all three. He has both military, law enforcement, and intelligence. And you can see that when you read magnifiedview.com, go to the website. It's a multi-million visited website and wonderful articles that all three of us worked on living and working together. It's the closest I can come to saying I've been in the military and working with so many luminaries. Lieutenant Colonel Scott Mann, he was a Green Beret, Special Forces for years and years. And I think one of the things that's most important is, and rare in these days, is to have someone who has all three, the military, intelligence, and law enforcement. I think that's a really good combination to have. And because typically you'll meet someone who just is an expert in one of those three categories.
That's true. Yeah.
It's helped me immensely.
That's a good point. Now we got about a minute, Tony.
Yeah, about a minute.
About a minute left, Roy. So give us your websites. How we can get a hold of you, learn more information about your campaign, and all that kind of stuff.
Well, thank you, Chuck Harold, for having me on. I'm running as a centrist presidential candidate. You can find me on roybarron.com. I put my number out, 442-224-4094. globalfreedomnet@gmail.com. I'm also starting a new news network called aslugline.com. It's a centrist news network. Also, go to magnifiedview.com. You can Google Voices of Global Freedom. It's on YouTube, thousands of views on there. If you just go to Global Freedom Net on YouTube, go to terrorcamps.com. That's also a multi-million visited website where it identifies all the U.S. Islamic terror camps that are being allowed to go forth across the United States. So feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. Also, over 65,000 on Twitter with My Human Compass, and also Real Roy Barron. I'd love to get our TV, radio, and podcast interviews. Give me a call. I really appreciate this opportunity, Chuck Harold, and let me know other opportunities out there. Give me a call and reach out to me. So, thank you so much. God bless you, and God bless America.
Thank you very much, Roy. Roy Barron for president, and visit all his websites and get some interesting information. And we'll see you next week on Security Guy Radio. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you.